So what you see in front of you is an example of an analyst dashboard that basically already shows that we can contextualize the threat intelligence that we get as we get observables from Tanium or SIEM solutions within the alerts. We can extract those, compare them to threat intelligence feeds, but also tell you what those mean on a contextual level. So how important are these IOCs for the organization based on the relation of the threat intelligence, the incident, and the type of user or person or asset that is actually attacked. Now, if I dive into the analyst dashboard, I will dive into an example of a new security incident that came in and show you how we can leverage Tanium to already enrich the security incident to really streamline this first phase of analysis. So what an analyst doesn't want to do is to always run the tedious task manually, but instead do it quicker and leverage an orchestration technology such as Tanium to provide it all the data that they would typically need in the beginning of the analysis phase to determine if an attack is real and what the potential impact is. So in this case, we see an example of a security incident that got ingested from Splunk about a suspicious download of a binary file. And on the right-hand side, we already see that there are some runbook executions being done that are requesting the analyst to do activities or to look up additional information. Now, within the incident timeline, you can see that before this incident was actually handed over to an analyst to look at, some automated activities already took place. Now, let's dive into that a little bit to give you an example of how we can leverage Tanium for that. Well, first of all, we can extract the observables from the security incident, either coming from Tanium directly or ingested via SIEM, where we can match them against threat intel findings. So we can, of course, give you an understanding of why certain observables become an IOC, and also give you an understanding how many other security incidents contain the same threat intelligence findings. Now, additionally, on the endpoint information, you can see that we ingested already a lot of information from the endpoint that downloaded potentially a piece of malware. So getting the running processes, but also the system details to confirm that the data that we have available in the CMDB is still the accurate information is there, because that is, of course, very important if we look at exploitability of systems. But also understanding the network statistics, so what communications are currently occurring on this system and what services are running, but also which user is logged on. So you can actually see that we use this information to populate the security incident, because Marcel was logged on this particular security incident, and that was the reason why this user was added as the affected user for this security incident. Now also you see that the business impact and the priority has been recalculated. And that is mainly because within ServiceNow we have this layer of context, business contextual information, to give an analyst a better understanding how a specific CI or configuration item is related to supporting a business service within the organization. And of course, that also allows you then to redraw this map so analysts can directly understand what kind of IT, security, or vulnerabilities are currently open for specific assets that you are looking at. Now, going back to the runbook activities, you can see that first we had to analyze if there were some additional malicious activities and decide if we want to take out this system, isolate it from the network so it cannot go out and affect other systems. Now, this is just one of the examples of how we can leverage Tanium for quick remediation, clicking the isolate button, not having the analyst spend time in another solution and do multiple clicks to do this very simplistic thing. Another item as well is that we were looking at the potential download of malicious files. We can look at the running processes, and then if we focus on the files that are executed by the end user, we can click on any of these files, so the PuTTY, the executable, and run a Tanium search through the whole estate to find out if any other system at this moment is actually running the same piece of malicious software as well. Now you can see that Tanium has came back with results and actually tells us that yes, there's another system, not client 01, but also client 02 that has potentially been that has taken potentially running this piece of software in its environment. So using these kinds of activities, you can see that very quickly in one pane of glass, an analyst can get a wealth of information that can speed up their analysis, but also use Tanium for quick response to enable the quick shutdown of a potential attack. Now, this is of course all very well on a automation perspective, and you can see one example here where we are executing specific Tanium activities from a runbook playbook. This is also very important for the CISO point of view, because of course, when the analyst is becoming more effective at their day-to-day operation, it will have a positive effect at the mean time to identify, the mean time to contain, the effectiveness of your security operations center. Now, the ability for ServiceNow to dashboard this out is massive. As you can see here, we can, of course, dashboard out where security incidents are related, but also quickly slice and dice information that we obtained about types of security incidents and subcategories and affected users in a very easy way to allow a CISO to look at how they are actually doing. Now, the same is true for vulnerability data. So as we are taking security incidents in from Tanium and SIEM solutions or other sources, we also take in vulnerability data and map that to the potential business impact that those have, where they reside, and decide which vulnerability should be first addressed. Now, in a CISO perspective, of course, I would want to know what vulnerabilities are there and how are they impacting our most critical services in the environment. But as James was saying, it is very important to also have this continuous loop. So now that we know that our first line of defense is operating in a certain way, how does that actually affect our control effectiveness and our risk for the organization? And there is this is what you see here in the following dashboard. I'm looking at my security controls overview. I focused on the authentication services, so the Active Directory or authentication devices that are running. And I can already see that I have some non-compliant controls. So I'm actually failing some hardening controls or some IT controls or cyber defense controls that I want to have intact within my organization to keep us secure. Now, in this case, this one is related to the inability to effectively patch. Now, that is, of course, a good example of how we can take in live vulnerability response data and sample that against the effectiveness of a corporate control, an IT control, and see if those are affected. So we no longer always have to bother the first line of the defense in a manual way, sending out emails, asking them to provide us screenshots and fill in Excel documents. We can do this on a continuous basis and a continuous loop with our continuous monitoring capability. Now, this, of course, also rolls up to the loss of integrity, because if you are unable to patch effectively, the loss of integrity, the eye of the CIA risk is, of course, negatively impacted as well. But let's just give you one example of a specific risk example. So as I'm looking at the controls that are failing in my organization and the link to risk, I might also want to dive straight into the risk part and find out how I'm actually doing on the risk exposure level. So here we are looking at the SAP Enterprise Services, which is continually typically processing sensitive information. And I will just quickly look at the calculated score. So not a statistical score of what is my inherent or residual score, but the dynamic changing calculated score of how I'm doing for this important business process and service in the environment. So I can see that I have some moderate scoring. So just click on one of those and you can see again, we are fairly easy able to link them to any risk, including the CIA scorings. Now the loss of integrity, of course, gets built up by a specific scoring here. We have a calculated score of moderate. Now, typically, this will be related to the effectiveness of controls. But in this case, if we look at the monitoring, we actually see that there are multiple things happening. yes, we have 36% of control failure, which of course drives up the risk of this particular risk. But we also have 50% failure of our continuous indicators. So that means that both from a control, but also on an indicator level, we can look for vulnerabilities or security incidents or types of threat intelligence being found within the environment and determine if that impacts a certain risk in a negative way. Now, these were just some brief examples of how we can demonstrate the security operations effectiveness together with Tanium. And I will switch back to James to round up the presentation.
So what we've demonstrated there is the fact that ServiceNow and Tanium obviously have a lot of integrations that can happen in a lot of different ways, right? So this is one thing where we work very close together with our partners as well. We share a lot of the same partner ecosystem. And we will work together to take the right approach for a customer, because there's more than one way we can work together. And I think, what does this mean for you as partners? I think the one thing, as a company that focuses on workflow, the end-to-end process, that's really good for people that are SIs and that provide consultancy services, because we're talking about a long-term journey, not a deployment of a tool. So working together with you as two partners to work with the customer over a series of improvements in maturity works in everyone's benefit, right? We get a nice sticky customer for our service, Tanium gets some license revenue, and you get some consultancy services, and obviously some margin in there as well. If you look at ServiceNow in this diagram here, this is the full size of the solution that we offer. And if you look in the bottom left, we have business context and asset and change. Tanium adds value here as well. So this sits in our IT suite, but Tanium can be used, as Danny said earlier, to enrich that data about that asset, to identify unauthorized changes that might just be policy infractions, or they could actually be malicious. The other thing that we have, which Danny mentioned earlier as well, is this CSDM, this common data model. So we have one data store that has information around IT, business relevance, vulnerabilities, the incidents that you're seeing, the threat intelligence that relates to the techniques and the actors that are working against you, going forward, the application vulnerabilities in the actual code that you build. But the other thing that you can put into this repository is you can extract that data and build your own applications on top of our platform, so that we can build workflows through low code and no code, but you can also build your own applications. Now, if you're a managed service provider, for instance, we are much more than just IT and security. We also do customer relationship management. So you can start to build applications that look at metrics from your customers, and they're not hitting their patching cycles. You can create a sales opportunity to automatically go out and contact that person about selling them managed desktop and server products. So when you start looking at the fact that most organizations handle a symptom, most security orchestration and response platforms enrich events because SIM content is bad, right? What we're looking at is, how do you make that SIM content better? Merge it with the results of an endpoint solution like Tanium to provide more context, and provide this end-to-end view from vulnerability management and managing your attack surface right the way across to the right of demonstrating the value to your internal people, managing the controls on a continual basis, as Sebastian showed, to then lowering the overhead involved in doing internal and external audit. So, as an end-to-end system, we need to go together with customers to talk to them about, and it's just our last slide, about what the right approach is. So you have any customers that are looking at anything like security orchestration, looking at threat intelligence, or looking at endpoint detection and response, bringing ServiceNow into that conversation, or if they're a ServiceNow customer, bringing Tanium into that conversation and us working together with you, we can really come up with an optimized solution and a maturity journey that will result in more income for yourselves and a more stickier customer.